Oh, sorry, just got the recording coming in. My name's Ignatius Black. I'm a principal and director here at Silvester Clark. So the way we're going to run this presentation, we'll we'll just do some introductions. There's myself, and then we've also got Henry, who's currently isolating at home with COVID, and Theo, who is in our office here in Wellington. Was going to cover a bit about Silvester Clark, talk about our projects, and then Henry and Theo are going to talk about some of their experiences working at Silvester Clark. I guess because of the size of, well, the number of people here, there's only 2 of you at the moment. If you have any questions on the way through, just stop and ask. If there's a building you recognise, just ask about it. Silvester Clark is a New Zealand owned company. We started in 1979 in Palmerston North, and then we expanded down to Wellington in the late 90s, and then almost 10 years ago we sort of expanded up to Auckland with some projects we're doing up there. And then recently, just this month, we've had an office, we've bought a company in the Hawke's Bay, which is now part of Silvester Clark as well. We're primarily structural engineering. We do have a fire engineer in Auckland, and some of the guys in the Hawke's Bay office can do fire engineering as well, and they do a little bit of project management. But most of what we do is structural engineering. We have a number of pretty exciting projects on the cards and coming up. We've got a pretty decent sized team with lots of skill and expertise. We're a big company now. We're a 75 strong. We're a little bit over 75, but we like to try and keep a smaller company feel. So we try to not be one of those big companies that, I guess, like a Beck or a Holmes or that, where you don't know each other. And so we try and be reasonably social. We try to have interaction between the offices, and we work hard on the culture within our company. So some of the benefits of working for Silvester Clark: we have a really good variety of work, and we don't pigeonhole people. And what we mean by that is you won't join us and get sort of stuck in one division and work in that division, like, I don't know, bridges or seismic strengthening. That we look to give people experience and exposure to all types of projects, and we don't really have teams as well. We have a project manager system, or a job manager, and they'll run projects, but they'll utilize people who are available to work on that project. So you will get a lot of variety in the types of projects you work on, and you'd also get to work with a number of different project managers, and you'd also potentially work on projects in other offices. We have ongoing training. We do a weekly tech session, which Henry organises, and we sort of take records of that for CPD. We have within those tech sessions, we'll sometimes have presentations from people within Silvester Clark. So they might talk about a project they've designed, some of the challenges with it. They might be talking about a course that they've been on. We might have someone from external from Silvester Clark come in and talk about a product or a new system or software that's available. We'll also do site visits to go and look at the projects that we're working on at the moment. We like to think we're quite agile in what we do, and due to our structure, we can move quickly to respond, or I guess take on new challenges. Like, for example, in the last couple of years, we've started to do quite a bit in the area of timber engineering, and prior to that, we took on seismic restraints. So there are things that some of the bigger companies might take a bit longer to get into, whereas if there's a new technology available and new systems, we're quite keen to adopt that. And just because of our nature, we can do that. We can dedicate resource to it, and due to our size, but also, I guess, partly our attitude to things, we do like to take on new challenges. Mobility: we have 4 offices now, and there are options to move between the offices. So say you're in Wellington and want to move to Auckland, there's that possibility. We like to work on like to help people have a good work-life balance. We do what's called a 9-day fortnight. So we still do 80 hours in a fortnight, but we do those over 9 days. So it's sort of like 9-hour days or 1 8-hour day, and that gets to the 80 hours. But then every second week, it's either a Monday or a Tuesday is a rostered day off. So it's essentially like having a 3-day weekend every second week. And if there's, like recently, if there's Easter, etc., just the day off moves to the Tuesday. We have regular social events. I've got some pictures up there. We recently, or last year, we did axe throwing, and we've done things like golf. There's a picture there from a mud run. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was a race that a number of guys entered into and we sponsored. We also do things like a burger making night. We went to, what was it recently, the pitch and putt? I can't remember if that's right.
Birdies and Brews in Wellington.
Birdies and Brews, yeah, that's pretty cool. So we're trying to do something like that on a regular basis. And we also have inter-office functions, which has been a little bit affected by COVID over the last few years, but we used to do things where we'd, we did like a, wasn't a treasure hunt, but it was basically, we went to this, you had to, as a competition, we had to find things and answer a whole lot of questions, and I can't remember the exact name of it, but we've done things like those on a regular basis. At the moment, we're doing, we had to curtail it during COVID, but we do lunches a couple of days a week. So we have all the food that, you know, bread, etc., to make the sandwiches and stuff. We also have, after 6 months, you can become eligible for the Southern Cross Wellbeing one healthcare insurance plan. That covers sort of if you have like something disastrous happens, you know, you'd be covered by health insurance. I realise a lot of young people are not too bothered by that. They kind of feel they're bulletproof, but as you get older, things start to change a bit, and it's, you know, the sooner you're in, the better it is. So we do encourage that. We've got some quite complex and challenging projects. Some of the ones you're looking at there on the top right-hand side is the Vero building in Auckland, which Brittany, you probably recognise. That's the second tallest building in New Zealand, and we've just finished a DSA on that recently. Beside that is, on the left-hand side, is one of the BRBs at QUEENSGATE Cinema Complex here in Wellington. So you can sort of get an idea of the size of that. Below that, you can see one of the base isolators being installed for the Paiatua dairy factory, which is the only base isolated dairy factory in New Zealand. And then the last picture on the bottom right, some details from the Arlington apartments that we've finished the design of most of the buildings there, and it's out for tender at the moment. So we look to utilise new technologies and approaches. We have the toys, we have like the ETAB, SAPs, and a number of other software programs. We also have the people who can show you how to use it. People who know how to use that software, know the tricks, and can sort of pass on their skills. So a lot of these things, it's not a case of won't be the first time that we've done a project like that. So we do have the expertise behind us. We've got a number of new build projects. One that you see there in the middle is one that's just been recently designed. It's a 5-storey city mission building going in here at Wellington and Oxford Street. And then to the left of that is King Street, which is well under construction at the moment. But we just have a regular number of new projects coming up, and we work across all sectors. So we do a lot of apartment buildings, and also office buildings, commercial projects like large supermarkets. Here in Wellington, we did the Countdown in Newtown, which I don't know if you know Wellington at all, but that's quite a significant building. We also work in the aged care sector quite a bit. We do a lot of retirement villages, and nowadays retirement villages are not just villas, they're actually, you know, multi-storey apartments, and they're quite nice, you know, nice developments. And we also do a lot of work in the primary sector with the dry stack dairy towers. We do a lot of seismic assessment and strengthening work. So I don't know, well, you see that the Vero buildings one we assessed, then also we talked about before the Basin Reserve stand, and then you're seeing above that the Backbencher Hotel here in Wellington, which is opposite Parliament. It's an old brick building, and Wellington Central Fire Station. They're just a few of the projects that we've worked on. And we've had, so we're doing the whole range, sort of like from I think the earliest building I've ever worked on was 1910, through to relatively modern buildings doing assessments on. And we've been quite lucky, and we've actually got a few awards for different projects. The grandstand, the Basin Reserve grandstand was one, and there was another building where we won the Supreme Award at the 2015 Earthquake Society conference for best adaptive seismic strengthening, which is a project I was involved in. It seemed like a sort of pretty mundane 2-story building, but the architects sort of put it forward, and we managed to we got an award for it, so we're quite proud of that. At the moment, we're doing a lot of timber design. I mentioned before the Arlington Apartments. That's a 6-story building. It's pretty cool. We're bracing it with shear walls, but it's light timber frames. So by light timber frame, we mean timber stud walls, except on some of the bottom floors, it's more or less like 3 or 4 studs, and then like 150 mil gap, and then 3 or 4 studs again. So there's a lot of timber in it. But yeah, they're pretty cool. We're using the Simpson strong rods. And another project you can see there, the top right-hand side, is the Plant and Food Research Facility in Nelson. You might recognise that, Bradley. It's so we're bracing that across the front. You can see that the cross braces on the side walls. We've got CLT shear walls. I can't recall what's bracing the back of it. I think it might be some more cross bracing. I'm not 100% sure. It's a little while since we did that one. So this is just some details about the Arlington apartment project. So it's 5 stories. Well, it's actually got, to be honest, it's 6 stories, but it's 5 stories of timber frame, and we've got a large concrete podium. We found it's just too hard to get the timber framing to work at the lower levels. And the main reason for that was actual settlement. What you find is you go down a timber frame building, the settlements get huge at the bottom, but it's all cumulative up the building. So it seemed to be 5 stories was the optimum size that we could get to work. And what's been quite challenging about this project is that there's actually no current code for this design. So we're using guidelines, and so it's an alternative solution. So it's not a solution that's within the Building Act. And we've worked with a peer reviewer as well on this project, so that they're reviewing what we're doing and providing a producer statement as well to confirm that they agree with what we've done. But it's been a really interesting and exciting project, and all the way through it, we've learnt new things, just things that you wouldn't necessarily think about with normal buildings, like, for example, long-term creep settlement of timber buildings and how you control that. Also detailing about the weatherproofing, how the diaphragms work. So it's been a really cool project which we've learned lots on, and we see this as an area that's going to be more and more buildings constructed out of timber going forward. So we find that quite exciting. This is the Vero Centre in Auckland. So 40-story building. I remember when it was built, it was the tallest building in New Zealand. So we've done quite a complex analysis of that, and the buildings, we can't talk about the score of that, but the building's done pretty well. There's sort of 1 or 2 areas where we're doing some sort of minor tweaks, but nothing that's a major concern. We do a lot of work in the primary sector. I don't know if you're familiar with I don't know if you know how a dry stack tower works, but it's basically like a 10, 11-story building that's pretty open. So you have big evaporators in there, and at the top you put in wet milk, and then it goes down, gets dried, and comes out as powder. But they're very complex buildings, just because of the way they don't have any diaphragms, and they've also, because of the valuable plant in them, there's a lot of interest in making sure that that building survives the earthquake. And we actually did we just finished a building down in Darfield when they had the 2010 earthquake, and that building did incredibly well. There wasn't any significant damage to it. And what we then got asked to do the same building in Paeatua, except the seismic demands for Paeatua are a lot greater than for Darfield, or for Darfield at the time. So what we did is we looked to reuse essentially the same design, but we base isolated it using triple pendulum isolators. So that was the first use of the triple pendulum isolators in New Zealand. And it's also the only base isolated dry stack dairy tower in New Zealand. But yeah, it was a pretty cool and exciting project. We did a lot of research to try and work out which isolators we thought would be the best. And we actually had the supplier, he came out to New Zealand and sort of talked through and met with us and sort of gave a lot of assistance, but just explaining how these isolators work. And I'm sure that's something you guys have covered at uni, but yeah, it's quite a cool project. Talked about the aged care developments. Some of them are huge. What you can see in the top right is Ellerslie in Auckland, and I'm not sure which one that is on the left-hand side, but the one on the bottom left is Hobsonville, and I think the one on the bottom right is the one that's being done out by Paeatua. So I think that's where you go off to what do you call it? Sorry, where the motorway splits off for the new transmission gully. So that's that plan and research building that we talked about. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. We got told that people have about a 10-minute attention span, 10 or 11 minutes, so I'm probably getting to that. So if you do have any questions about these buildings, just feel free to butt in. There's some details about the QUEENSGATE project. So you can sort of see the size of the column connection there with the big BRB beside it. It's hard to sort of appreciate the scale of it, but it's a huge building, huge footprint there. And that slab is, I think, can you remember how thick it is, Henry, or is it? I think it's like
at the ground. Not sure. I can't quite remember at the ground level how thick it is. 1.5 meters.
Yeah, I think it's like 1.5 meters.
Oh yeah, 1.5 meter rafts down at the bottom.
And then when they were pouring it, it was almost like a steel bar. The gap the size of a steel bar, then another steel bar is just huge. The issue with that one is that it's a liquefiable site, so it's just a big raft foundation to spread the loads. This is a project that we're about to start on shortly. It's the Wellington Operating House. We're doing seismic strengthening of that building. And this is another project we've got, which we've been doing some concept design for. It's a luxury resort down in Te Anau, and this is like, it's next level. It's basically where you have the billionaires go. They're like digging into hill sites. There's sort of like the underground parts to the building. There's like indoor tennis courts. It's something like, I think they're saying something like $30,000 a night to stay at it. So it is next level. It's pretty cool. It's got a Japanese architect who's designing it, and so we're quite lucky to be involved in that. So it's like I say, we're just at concept design at the moment, but over the next few months we're doing the detailed design for it. That's a project that. Who was involved in Henry or Theo? You guys?
Yeah, I'm doing the monitoring of all that at the moment. So
yeah, so this one's under construction at the moment. It's a 5-story building or 6-story concrete shear walls. It's I think it's finishing. Is it this year or?
Yeah, finishing this year. Structure's pretty much all complete. All the roof bracing and stuff's in there now. So structurally, it's pretty much done. It's just all the architectural, fitting out the kitchens and stuff like that. But yeah, it had about 160 piles down at the ground level, and that was 750 raft, I think, in most spots. So it's a lot of concrete involved in it, a lot of steel work. So
not as sustainable as the timber buildings.
yeah, that's this one's half Kiwi build as well.
Yeah. We talked about the basin reserve. One area I've been specialising in the last few years is seismic restraint of non-structural components, and we cut our teeth on the acute services building down in Christchurch, the new one. We had about 21,000 restraints went in there. That was quite involved, and it was one of those projects after you finished it, if you knew what you knew when you began, you'd do things completely differently. So what we've got here is the Wellington Children's Hospital, and to try and make the spaces less congested, we've used a series of suspended frames from the structure above. Now, while I know some people may not think seismic restraint is that sort of sexy, it is actually quite interesting and challenging. And it's also, we find it's really good, and Henry's done a bit of work on it to just understand how people will build things. Like, you've always got challenges trying to fit around the structure, the services, not to clash with things, and also understanding the materials that builders will use, and sort of the construction challenges. And so I think it's quite a valuable area for engineers to do a bit of work in, but we do have teams that do specialise in seismic restraints, and it's becoming more and more of a thing following the well, it's probably mainly the Wellington earthquakes, where buildings didn't get badly damaged, but the services fell down. Down in Christchurch, after they had the earthquake, because the buildings were getting demolished as well, people didn't sort of pay as much attention to the failures that happened to the non-structural. And I don't know if you cover non-structural, but that's things like the pipe work, the HVAC, fire sprinkler systems, cable trays, also the partition walls and suspended ceilings. So it's an area that we've got a reasonable amount of expertise in. That's just another example of a timber frame building we did here in Wellington. We do a lot of architecturally designed houses as well, and they're quite interesting and challenging. Just trying to get the architect's vision to work while also providing a structure that works is can be quite interesting. It's just another building that we've strengthened here in Wellington. What I might do, I'll let, did you, Henry, and then third, you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, we can jump in. I can go first.
Did you have any slides? I should move it back.
Is there, if you go back to the King Street one, I can talk through that one. Big, good one. Yeah, so this one. So King Streets, this is one that it was probably my first monitoring job when I moved to the company with my buddy. So we kind of, that's one thing we like to do with our grads. Everyone gets a buddy when they go to the company. So Theo's got one, everyone sort of has one. So what we did, and I sort of done the same with Theo, even though he's not directly my buddy, is in your first few weeks, especially when you got a bit more time on your hand, like to try to get everyone out to site and see how stuff actually fits together. So for a building like King Street like this, it's sort of the same, but then going up each level. So like what we'd do is I went out with my buddy for the first few weeks, and I'd go look at the first, sort of look at like the level 1 floors, and then figure out how that works and what to look out for and what they need to check in as such. And then they sort of repeat it on level 2, 3, 4. So once you've sort of seen it a few times, then I could start to go up by myself. So I've took over this job about July last year. So I've been doing that by myself. So this is 6-story. I think it's about 30 million worth of construction. There's 90 apartments there, about 130 guys on site most days. But so this is coming together now. It's got all the roof bracing and stuff in, which you can't see. But the scale of it's pretty impressive. So that's one of the ones that I've been doing. So that was probably my main monitoring one, which is good. But yeah, monitoring is quite good in terms of you see how it's constructed and then see the different bits and pieces that pop up on site. If you go to the end, Ignatius, is there any more photos there? I'm not sure if Hannah chucked them in or not, did she, of different jobs? After your stuff, potentially. Otherwise, I can just share my screen if it's... Oh, yeah, there we go. If you go back to that one. Yeah, that one here. See, there's a few of the other ones. So that's King Street there on the right side, Monark Apartments. So that was in the top right just before Christmas. So now they've got the cladding up the side, the roof's all covered in, they've got all the purlins. So then down the bottom right, that's I think it was the 3rd level slab floor. Just to give you an idea of the sort of scale of what's going on with the pouring of concrete. So I guess it's quite a lot to get 93 apartments in. But then, yes, that's an idea. And then you can see out to the side the other concrete precast walls. And then, so to the left, top left, we've got QUEENSGATE shopping malls. That was the one Ignatius showed before, which if you've been in Wellington, QUEENSGATE's a pretty big complex. So we've been doing the strengthening and stuff like that for that building. So we did the strengthening of it. And then now for that one, we're doing the cinema itself as well, the fit out of that. So you can see here, you can see the different cinemas, I guess, as such, they've got steel beams, essentially for everyone to sit on, and then timber going over top. And then you can see the actual screens themselves as well. So that's quite an interesting one. You can't quite see it with all the other stuff blurred out. A different one in terms of not just your straight building, a lot of fit out, and a lot of additional steel to get different bits and pieces to work. And then the other one that the main one I'm doing at the moment is Barker Street, which is a jobs for Armstrongs, who are the car dealership. So they're creating a new building where you can see in the bottom right, there's a bit of a ramp that goes up to this top level. And then that's all a secondhand dealership down below, up top. So it'll be all glass around the outside. And then down on the bottom is the workshop itself. So I think there's about 21 bays down the bottom for them to work on the cars. Essentially, they've got more demands. They need a bigger workshop. And then to give you an idea of the scale, it's about 20 meters wide, this building, and then 55 meters long. And we've got portals running in one direction, spanning the whole way in some spots, spanning the whole 20 meters. So those at once, so the columns are like 900 WB, so 900 deep to take those loads. And then the other direction, we've got precast wall in one direction where it's up against an existing building. And then the other directions, K-frames. So that's sort of an idea of some of the jobs that we work on. Massive range in terms of house jobs, start with a lot of house jobs, which are quite good, just a bit more first principles before you get into some of this bigger stuff. And then did a lot of seismic restraint stuff, as Ignatius mentioned, with City Rail Link up in Auckland. We've been doing that for the seismic restraint stuff. Strengthening Opera House, did the DSA for that one. Yeah, 8-story concrete building strengthening has been quite a bit. So I've been here for 1.5 years now. So I was in your shoes 1.5 years ago. So know what you guys are all going through if you've got any questions. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it so far, and it's quite interesting. You'll quickly learn that one day you'll feel on top of everything. Like there's some days where you think, oh my God, I've got the hang of this. I've done this before. And then the next day you'll have no idea, but then you'll ask someone else. So I've got like Lucas and other people around me who I'll ask for questions who've been there 5 or 10 years. But then there's also times that they'll ask me questions because there's just a lot that other people don't know as well. So until you've done it, you won't know. So it's sort of a bit of give and take, which I like. And we're all quite friendly in the office and willing to help, which is can be quite different to other offices where people find it a bit more of a competition within people. But yeah, and as Ignatius mentioned, social events is another big part of why I like Silvester Clark, and like lunches twice a week, just simple small things like that keep staff happy. And we all have lunch together. We just go to the fridge and just grab chicken and make our own wraps and sandwiches. And then yeah, we do work drinks every week as well, which is another good chance to catch up with everyone. So we do that every Friday. We'll just go down to the kitchen, have a few beers or fizzy drink for those that don't want a drink, an alcoholic drink, and then just chips. And it's a nice chance just to catch up in a more social setting. But yeah, if you got any questions, just feel free to yell out at the end or just message us. Because yeah, I was sitting in one of these exact things 2 years ago because of COVID as well at that stage. So it wasn't in person for mine either. So I remember James and Gabby doing it for us, sitting on this exact thing. So I'll pass you over to Theo and he can give you a bit of a run through of what he's done.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Henry. Yeah, so I'm this year's grad for Silvester Clark in the Wellington office. I grew up in Nelson and went to Canterbury Uni. So coming to Wellington was, a bit of a step out of my regular comfort zone, but it was, it's turned out well so far. So yeah, as Henry was saying, lots of my jobs are kind of, when I first moved to the office, it was quite cool. I got to put my fingers in a lot of different pies. I got to do a lot of different things, starting off with just like some random new deck with a spa on top of it out in the Marlborough Sounds, and then moving on to like big freestanding fireplaces, and then slowly building up. And now I'm working on some large house alterations and new residential house designs and stuff all over the country, which is quite cool. Yeah, so like Henry was talking about too, the 20 Barker Street, I've actually managed to do a couple things in there as well, looking at not the huge structure as Henry designed, yeah, but looking at framing out some existing openings and stuff inside there, which has been quite interesting to do. Quite a unique thing compared to, putting together what I've done at uni and, seeing it in action. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, and looking at my the photos attached to mine, it looks a bit sad, but that is unfortunately the starting point, as I've only been about 3 months in so far. So I'm working off a lot of architectural plans and stuff, which is quite exciting. Yeah, so lots of design work, but then also included in there, as Henry mentioned in his talk, I have gone to some site visits and stuff. So that started off being attached with the buddies. That was like with Henry, with a couple of other more senior engineers and stuff, and just kind of tagging along. They'd kind of have a checklist that I could, match myself off. And, it's quite nice being able to look at plans and being like, oh, I can see these plans and see the, the bars and everything looks as it is. And so that was quite cool. So after a couple of those, I actually managed to go out and do some of my own ones of those, which has been quite cool, doing the full investigation and report writing process. Yeah, so even though I've only been here for 3.5 months, I've found that I have covered quite a range of stuff across the engineering and design sector, which, yeah, it's been quite enjoyable. Yeah, and also on the more social side of things, as Henry was saying, it's quite good too. Everyone's very friendly, everyone's very approachable. Especially as a new engineer, I've found that there's been a lot of things I just haven't seen, or like, I touched on many years ago. So I just kind of approach anyone in the office and they'll be happy to spend 15-20 minutes sitting down and running me through it, or, making sure that I can just understand what's going on, which is really cool. And yeah, Friday drinks, always fun. And part of my role as grad is I've picked up as in charge of ordering and making sure the fridge is always stocked, which is nice. Yeah, especially being in central Wellington, you've got 6 or 7 nice craft breweries, so it's always changing up. So yeah, it's been quite good.
We've gone back to having, we get flasks from, where do they come from, those flasks?
Yeah, they're just one of the local shops that have good contacts with the breweries. Yeah, so yeah, that's quite cool. So just picked up a big box of like a miscellaneous box. I think we'll do some nice taste testing on Friday this week. Should be fun.
Yeah, but it's not, I suppose we didn't say it's not all we do though. We do a lot of engineering as well.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and even Wellington in general, and like all the offices and stuff, they've great cultures and lots of communication between them and everything, which has been quite nice. Yeah.
We'll often, with our tech sessions between the offices, we'll often have a presentation from one of the other offices. And so we do that over, we can either do it at our desks, or we go to the upstairs meeting room. So yeah, so we try and encourage interaction between the offices, so we kind of maintain that same culture across the company. I might just now jump back. So I just want to just talk about like the type of graduate that we're looking for. So what we're after is people who are inquisitive. Like we're talking about before, it's not about, people don't come out perfectly rounded and know everything. It's a matter of learning stuff, but always being inquisitive and wanting to learn and grow. That's really important, and we like to encourage that. We also encourage being a team player, working with other people, like we just talked about, helping other people. There'll be times I'll go out and I'll ask a graduate how to do something, because there's a new system, something I haven't done, or something I haven't done for a long time. But you know, it's always important to work together and realize that everyone else is learning as well. You never, within engineering, you never really stop learning. There's always new things that come up, new technologies, new systems, just different understanding of how things are done. We look for people who've got integrity and a good work ethic. By integrity, we mean, like, if there's something you don't know, there's nothing wrong with that. You should never try and sort of compensate, or, you know, if there's something that you don't know, just admit it. There's nothing wrong with that. We can just explain how things work, or overcome that. But we're also quite keen on people who've got a reasonable technical capability as well, and have a good understanding of you know, just engineering principles. What I've found is that people who, if you get good experience with, you know, working on the construction side, is that if we do practical hours, that can actually go a long way. Like, some of what people learn there is perhaps more valuable when you first start than what you've actually learned at university, because you'll come up with a problem and you might have a theoretical solution, but then you remember from being on the site, well, we can't actually do that. There's no way someone can build that. And that's another important thing to understand, that anything we design will eventually get constructed, so it needs to be buildable as well. Yeah, so there's the details there for how to apply for a position. If you guys have any questions, just fire away. Anyone, you can ask anyone.
I have a question. You're talking about using timber for a sustainable purpose. Is that kind of the avenue Silvester Clark is taking towards being a bit more sustainable and climate friendly?
It's an interesting one. I quite like it. I really enjoy working with timber, and I've done quite a bit of reading, and I can see a lot of the benefits about it. We don't have a policy as such, like, it's not something we're deliberately trying to do, but we do see that, well, I believe it's really good to reduce carbon. It basically sucks carbon out of the environment. You sequence it into the timber, provided the building doesn't burn down, or you don't chuck in the landfill, it's locked in. There are arguments about the design life of timber, because we obviously have a number of different engineers within the company. We have people who have contacts within the steel industry, or actually involved in the steel industry, and they might have different opinions on it. But I think it's a really interesting area. There's some quite cool challenges. It's quite cool to see how the knowledge in that area is developing at the moment. So it's an area that we see more opportunity there, and we'd like to do more work in that space. Have you got an interest in timber design, or?
Yeah, I guess over the summer I did a bit of timber design, but I think it's quite an interesting concept to kind of look at whether I should be using more steel or concrete or timber, or what's going to really work out in the long term.
Yeah, to be honest, there's actually a lot of steel on a timber building. Is one thing.
There is. Yeah.
And the other one I'm not too sure about. There's obviously a lot of glues, etc. We've got a project coming up. It's part of the Living Building Challenge. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's part of it is the sustainability, but there's also another number of other criteria that get assessed in terms of the materials that get used, sort of how environmentally friendly they are, and there's also other sort of aspects to do with the space. I quite like timber frame buildings. I think they're quite nice. I think it's nice to see timber. It feels a bit more natural than concrete. But I don't know, it's, there'll be projects where it's more suitable to use other materials. So some of the real challenges, some of the big challenges we had with the Arlington apartment was actually to do with fire and acoustic. And there are some quite interesting challenges about how to overcome that. And there's been some quite interesting learnings. One issue is that you actually obviously got timber's pretty good at sort of preventing the spread of fire, but actually provides more fuel to the fire. So we've had to the fire engineers require that the underside of the CLT floors get lined with with jib fireline. But they're also exploring at the moment if there's an intermittent paint, which I know it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. It's quite cool. It's just, you know, just interesting to come up with a problem and try and work through it.
Yeah, with that paint concept, my project supervisor is a bit skeptical of it.
I'm skeptical because it's still intermittent paint just stops heat, you know, slows down the heating of, well, for steel. We're used to it in terms of steel. I'm not sure. My understanding is that timber starts charring at a lot lower temperature. So whether the intermittent paint can prevent the temperature rise, I don't know. I'm skeptical about it as well.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
I had a question about, did Theo and Henry, did you start off as interns with Silvester and Clarke?
No, so I was at Dunning Thornton's for my internship, and then Hawkins before that. So construction, and Ignatius is right on that. Like, you do learn a lot from if you did construction hours, just in terms of how to build stuff. But no, I interned elsewhere, and then looked to move to Silvester Clark after that. It was probably, yeah, it was a good decision for me. It's in terms of, I was pretty dead set on I didn't want to go to one of the big companies. So like your Beckers, your WSPs.
So that then you could get like
yeah, otherwise, like, so now
a
a lot
range of people to talk to about stuff. And
yeah, it's good to have people to bounce off in the office, and you can get quite like put in just to one aspect. So like a lot of the people I know at big companies, they won't have been to site at all in their whole year and a half. And then a lot of it will have only worked on one or two projects because you just do a small part of like a massive project. But Silvester Clark's good in terms of, we do have small jobs, but as well, like house jobs and stuff, where you can just do that all yourself. But there's also bigger jobs as well that you can sort of get involved in. So you've got the variety, which I guess a lot of big companies wouldn't bother with a lot of the smaller stuff, which is arguably probably where you learn the most from. So
yeah, I was going to ask, do you learn more from like doing lots of different jobs and then changing how you apply things to different jobs and that sort of thing?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And it's something you're constantly learning as well, opposed to a lot of people, they'll just, I know at some companies you've got column splice experts, for example, and that's sort of what they do on repeat, which, although it might be easy, it's not fun doing the same stuff every day. So
yeah.
And
how long are you a grad for, and what do they, is there like a grad rotation some companies have, and what's the buddy system? That sounds really cool.
We find it's an interesting one because we do, it's, some companies might have a really defined definition of it. I think we take the view as you're probably a grad for maybe a couple of years, then you become, we use a term like a design engineer, and then intermediate engineer, and then a senior engineer. A lot of it does come down to capabilities and what you can do, and a lot of those sort of the titles, I guess, they really represent how much responsibility you're taking for the design, how much ownership of projects that that you're taking on. Because I'm sure, Henry, you go to meetings sometimes with clients, and like as you progress, that's part of your development, is that you're not just doing the design, you're actually meeting with the people you're doing the designs for, the architects, and getting more of an understanding of what they're trying to achieve as well. Because often particularly if you don't have the exposure, you're doing something, but you may not understand what the architect's trying to achieve. And therefore you might sort of constrain the way you approach a problem and how you're looking at solving it. Whereas if you understand what the architect, you might be able to say, hey, look, we can't quite get to work this way, but if we did this a bit differently here, or like they want an open space here and we haven't got enough room, you say, well, if you give us a bit more room over here to put in a bit more of a bracing structure, we can free up that space. But like it's been, just understanding what people are trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's like King Street. I'd go to fortnightly meetings for that, just on sites. That's with the architect, builders, project managers, clients, the whole lot. So I'd go to those ones by myself, and then other ones like Barker Street will normally be two of us that go to that. Opera House, three of us that go to that. But even if you're at the very young level, it's still depending on the scale. You go to meetings by yourself or go with other people, but it's good to be involved in those. If you're at a bigger company, they probably wouldn't even bother taking you to those meetings, and they'll just report back to you. But yeah, you sort of need to be at those meetings to actually understand it.
Yeah, I like, that's the thing. I like to take people to the meeting because then you understand what the objectives are, because often people who go to the meeting, like myself, won't necessarily be the person who's actually doing the design. And I can come back and try and convey what I've taken from that meeting, but there might be just that understanding that you get from being there. You might understand what, what the end goal is, and it just helps better with the approach you take. Whereas I might come back and say, oh, I need you to do the bracing design for this house or whatever, and someone can just go and do that, but they won't actually know what others within the design team, what their objectives are and what their what challenges they're having, and how we can maybe help them.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that a bit already, which is quite cool. Through like emails and stuff, like direct communication with the architects, like they're saying, hey, we want this window here, and we see you've got like this bracing element here, could we replace this with this? And it's quite cool giving them the options, like, hey, we could put a portal frame over this, but it's going to cost you a bit more, or we could reduce this window a bit or shift over here. So you do get that quite cool one-on-one. It's quite exciting stuff.
Yeah, that does sound really good to have all that communication going around and feeling open and confident enough to talk to higher up people and stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. I'm not sure. I think this is down for 15 minutes. I'm not sure if
Yeah, we've done a pretty good job. Has anyone else got any final questions?
It's quite funny. There's more presenters than audience.
Oh, there was 10 people in there at one stage.
Oh, were there? I didn't pick up on that.
There's 9 in there currently.
Oh, okay. Any questions from the people we can't see? I can only see. I can see
my sister hiding down there.
Okay.
That sounds good. We might as well wrap it up then.
Yes, I jump back in. Yeah, it was a really good presentation. I mean, got interactive questions and stuff. We're coming up that 15-minute mark. It's good use of time.
If you guys do have any questions as well, feel free to email us if you want any queries. The other thing is, if you did want to come in, if you're in Wellington or even Auckland, just come and have a look at our offices and meet with us. Just let us know. We're more than happy to do that.
Well, thank you. That's been a very informative talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Sweet, thank you.